I adjusted the filter settings on my acoustic array for the third time that morning, tweaking the gain on the lower frequencies. The soft blue glow from the monitoring station lit up my face as I leaned closer to the display. 18 months we'd been down here in Station Argus, our underwater research facility nestled at 3,000 feet below the surface. 18 months of listening to the deep ocean's constant murmurs and whispers, cataloging the sounds of known marine life while searching for something else entirely. "You're going to wear out those dials, Thomas," Ember said from her communication station across the command center. I didn't look up from my work. The acoustics were off again in Sector 12, too much ambient noise. My hands moved automatically across the controls, making minute adjustments. Each day followed the same routine: wake up, check systems, adjust frequencies, analyze data, sleep, repeat. But I didn't mind. That's what it took to make discoveries. That's what I'd signed up for when I accepted the position of Chief Acoustic Engineer for this mission. The command center hummed with the quiet efficiency of well-maintained machinery. 5 workstations arranged in a semicircle faced the main viewing screen, each dedicated to a different aspect of our operation. Mine was the largest, positioned front and center, a testament to the mission's primary focus on acoustic research. "Want some coffee?" "I'm making a fresh pot," Ember called over. "Black, 2 sugars," I answered, still focused on the readouts scrolling across my screen. The hydrophone array we'd deployed across 50 square miles of ocean floor generated terabytes of data daily. Most of it was noise, currents, distant shipping, known biological sources. But somewhere in that digital haystack was the needle we'd come for. Ember set the steaming mug beside me. At 34, she was the youngest senior staff member, but her expertise in communications technology had earned her the position. Her dark ponytail swung as she leaned over my shoulder to look at my screen. "Still hunting for your sea monster?" she asked with a slight smile. "It's not a monster," I said, taking a sip of coffee. "It's an undiscovered species, and yes, I'm still looking." The coffee burned my tongue, but I barely noticed. My attention was fixed on the patterns of sound waves flowing across my display. Somewhere out there was a massive biological entity that science had yet to document. The Navy had picked up its acoustic signature years ago, low-frequency vocalizations unlike any known cetacean. That's why Station Argus existed. That's why 6 of us had agreed to spend 2 years in an underwater habitat the size of a small apartment building. I rolled my shoulders to work out the stiffness. At 42, I wasn't as resilient to long hours hunched over displays as I used to be. My back complained after each long shift, but I ignored it. Small discomforts were a worthwhile trade for scientific breakthrough. I took another sip of coffee and continued adjusting the sensitivity on the lower frequency bands. We were searching specifically for bioacoustic signals below 20 Hz, the range where our target supposedly vocalized. Most of these sounds were below human hearing threshold, but our equipment could detect and visualize them perfectly. "Thomas." Ember's voice cut through my concentration. Something in her tone made me look up immediately. She wasn't at her station anymore. She had moved to the secondary acoustic monitoring display. "What is it?" I asked, pushing back from my desk. Her fingers flew across the touchscreen, enlarging a section of data. "Look at this frequency pattern. It just came in from the Western Array." I crossed to her station in 3 quick strides. My heart rate picked up as I studied the waveform displayed on her screen. Long, pulsing waves with regular intervals between them. Definitely biological in origin, but with an amplitude that suggested something massive. "How long has it been transmitting?" I asked, leaning closer. "Just started about 40 seconds ago. It matches the parameters we've been looking for." I felt a rush of adrenaline as I studied the pattern. After 18 months of false alarms, equipment issues, and disappointment. Here it was, exactly what we'd come for. "Pull up the directional data," I said, my voice steady despite my excitement. Ember tapped several commands, and a map of our sensor network appeared, with lines triangulating the sound's origin. "Approximately 12 miles west of us," she said. "Depth reading suggests it's at roughly 2,800 feet, just a bit above our level." I straightened up. "Get the others. Tell them to drop whatever they're doing and come to command. Now." While Ember made the calls, I transferred the acoustic data to the main display and began running analysis algorithms. The waveform was unlike anything in our extensive database of marine mammal vocalizations. The pattern was too regular, too structured for a standard whale call, yet unmistakably biological rather than mechanical. Cooper arrived first, his medical badge still clipped to his rumpled shirt. At 45, our medical officer looked perpetually tired, the dark circles under his blue eyes a permanent feature after a year and a half underwater. "This better be good, Thomas," he said, running a hand through his thinning, sandy hair. I was in the middle of inventory. "Trust me," I replied, not taking my eyes off the display. "It's what we've been waiting for." Douglas Park entered next, his tool belt still hanging from his waist. As chief engineer, he was responsible for keeping Station Argus functioning, and he took that responsibility seriously. His solid build and no-nonsense expression gave him a perpetual air of competence. "What's the emergency?" he asked, wiping grease from his hands with a rag. "No emergency," I assured him. "Something better." Debbie Owens was the last to arrive, her black bob still damp from the shower. As our marine biologist, she'd likely been in the wet lab analyzing samples from yesterday's collection run. "Everyone's here," Ember announced, taking her seat at communications. I straightened up, feeling a sense of significance wash over me. This was the moment we'd all been waiting for, the moment I'd been waiting for my entire career. 18 months ago, we came down here with a mission, I began, gesturing toward the main screen where the acoustic signature pulsed in blue waves, to find and document an unidentified large marine organism that naval hydrophones had detected sporadically over the past decade. I tapped a command, and the acoustic pattern expanded across the display. "What you're looking at is a bioacoustic signature that matches the theoretical parameters we developed based on the Navy's data. It began transmitting approximately 4 minutes ago, originating from 12 miles west of our position." Debbie stepped closer to the screen, her expression shifting from tired irritation to professional interest. "That's definitely biological," she said, studying the pattern. "But the amplitude suggests something much larger than any known cetacean species." "Exactly," I said, unable to keep a note of triumph from my voice. "The frequency range is similar to blue whale vocalizations, but the pattern structure is entirely different. And based on our calculations of sound production relative to body mass, whatever made this would have to be at least twice the size of the largest blue whale ever recorded." Cooper whistled softly. "That would put it at what? 60, maybe 70 feet long?" "At minimum," I confirmed. "Possibly larger." Douglas crossed his arms, his expression cautious. "And it's heading toward us?" I checked the tracking data. "It appears to be stationary for now, or moving very slowly. We're getting continuous vocalizations, which gives us an excellent opportunity to study it." "If it decides to come this way," Douglas said, "what kind of impact could something that size have on the station? We're talking about an organism potentially heavier than a loaded semi-truck." The concern in his voice was justified. Station Argus was built to withstand the crushing pressure of 3,000 feet of seawater, but direct physical impact from a massive organism was another matter entirely. I turned to face the team, my confidence unwavering. That's the beauty of our position here. Station Argus was specifically designed for silent running. Our external profile is minimal. Our lighting can be completely darkened, and our hull is acoustically dampened. I pulled up the station's specifications on a secondary screen. We can observe without being detected. The Navy didn't just build this station for scientific research, they built it for covert observation. Our cooling systems are designed to minimize thermal signature. Our external lighting is in spectrums less visible to deep-sea organisms, and our hull material absorbs rather than reflects sonar. Ember nodded. We're essentially invisible down here unless something bumps right into us. Precisely, I said. Whatever's creating this sound won't even know we're here. We can observe, record, and analyze without influencing its behavior. Debbie looked thoughtful. If this is a new species, we need to document everything: vocalization patterns, movement, behavior. This could be revolutionary. I want a full sensor array directed toward these coordinates, I said to Ember. Passive monitoring only. No active sonar that might alert it to our presence. Douglas still looked skeptical. And if it does detect us somehow? Then we go to minimal power, reduce our signature even further, and wait for it to lose interest, I said. But that's extremely unlikely. Whatever this organism is, it's been swimming these depths for who knows how long without human detection. It's not looking for us. Cooper leaned against a console. What's the plan then? We monitor continuously. I want 24-hour coverage of that acoustic signature. Debbie, I need you to start developing behavioral hypotheses based on the vocalization patterns. Cooper, review what we know about deep-sea megafauna neurological capabilities. I want to understand how this thing might perceive its environment. Douglas, make sure all our systems are running at optimal stealth levels. They nodded, professional excitement beginning to replace their initial concern. This is what we came for, I reminded them. The discovery of a lifetime is 12 miles away. Let's do our jobs and document it properly. The team dispersed to their stations, a new energy humming through the command center. I returned to my primary monitoring station, adjusting the filters to better isolate the mysterious signal. 18 months, Ember said quietly beside me. Was it worth the wait? I watched the pulsing acoustic signature on my screen, each wave representing the vocalization of an organism unknown to science, something enormous, swimming in the darkness just beyond our reach. Absolutely, I replied, certainty filling me. We're about to make history. Unknown to me then, as I sat confidently at my station certain we were safely hidden in the depths, my assumption about remaining undetected would soon prove dangerously wrong. I checked the time on my monitor. Exactly 48 hours since we'd first detected the acoustic signal. The initial excitement that had energized our team was still present, but something else had begun to creep in around the edges. I rubbed my temples, trying to focus on the data streams flowing across my screen. Dr. Estrada? I turned to see Josie Campbell standing in the doorway of the command center, her face drawn and pale. She held a cup of coffee that she wasn't drinking. What can I do for you, Josie? I asked, swiveling my chair away from the monitors. I've had this headache for almost 2 days now. She stepped further into the room. I've taken the maximum dosage of painkillers, but nothing helps, and I'm not the only one. I frowned. Who else? Marco from engineering, Lisa from the biolab, even Ember mentioned something similar at breakfast. She set her untouched coffee down. And none of us are sleeping well. I haven't had more than 3 hours straight since we found that thing. The timing wasn't lost on me. I pulled up the crew health monitoring dashboard that Cooper maintained. Sure enough, there was a pattern forming, subtle but present. Several crew members had logged sleep disturbances or requested mild analgesics in the past 2 days. "I'll speak with Dr. Butler about it," I assured her. "It could be environmental, maybe a small air quality issue or pressure variance." After Josie left, 2 more crew members stopped by with similar complaints. By midday, I'd heard enough to warrant a conversation with our medical officer. I found Cooper in the med bay, reviewing data on his tablet. "Thomas," Cooper acknowledged me without looking up. "I was about to call you. Let me guess. Headaches and sleep issues?" He nodded, setting down his tablet. 7 cases reported officially. Probably more who haven't come in. "Any pattern to it?" I asked, leaning against the examination table. Cooper ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Nothing obvious in their medical histories or station assignments. It's station-wide." He pulled up a station schematic on his screen. No correlation with ventilation systems or water supply routes either. "When did it start?" "First complaints came in yesterday morning, but when I asked, most said they started feeling it the night before." He looked up at me. "About 18 hours after we detected your acoustic signal." I considered this. "Could be coincidence." "Could be," Cooper agreed, but his expression suggested otherwise. He got up and closed the door to the med bay, something he rarely did. "There's something else," he said, his voice lowered. "This stays between us for now, all right?" I nodded. "I'm hearing things." His eyes darted to the corners of the room. Whispers, just at the edge of hearing, like someone's talking just around the corner, but when I check, there's no one there. "Could be stress," I offered, though the timing made me uneasy. That's what I thought too, so I ran a full ear exam on myself. Tympanic membranes are normal. No infection, no fluid buildup. Audiometry shows normal hearing across all frequencies. He paused. "I'm not imagining it, Thomas." I sat down across from him, my own confession forming. I felt it too. Not whispers exactly, but a pressure, like when you're in a room and someone's watching you, but no one's there. "When did it start for you?" "Yesterday. Maybe the day before." I thought back. It comes and goes. Cooper looked relieved that he wasn't alone in his experience. "What do you think it is?" "Some kind of group psychosis triggered by isolation." "I think it might be infrasound," I said, the idea crystallizing as I spoke. "Frequencies below 20 Hz, below human hearing range. We can't hear them consciously, but they can affect our bodies, our mental states. They've been linked to feelings of unease, discomfort, even hallucinations in some studies. And our mystery creature produces sounds in that range," Cooper added, catching on. "Exactly. Whales, elephants. They use infrasound for communication over long distances. If our creature is as large as we think, it could be producing powerful low-frequency sounds that our instruments detect, but our ears don't register consciously." Cooper considered this. It would explain the common symptoms, despite different locations in the station. Sound waves that low would propagate through the entire structure. "I need to check something," I said, standing up. "Keep monitoring the symptoms, but let's keep the whispers between us for now. No need to cause panic." I spent the next few hours reviewing our acoustic data, focusing on the lowest frequency bands. The creature's emissions had changed subtly over the past 2 days. Longer pulses, slightly different patterns. I couldn't determine if it was moving closer or simply changing its behavior, but something had definitely shifted. That evening, I was alone in the command center, running analysis programs on the latest data. The rest of the team had gone to dinner. I reached for my coffee mug and froze. A vibration passed through the station, not violent, but unmistakable. It wasn't like the familiar hum of our generators or the occasional adjustment of the ballast systems. This felt organic, rhythmic. It resonated through my chest cavity, making my sternum vibrate in a way that was deeply unsettling. The lights flickered once, twice, then stabilized. I sat motionless, waiting to see if it would happen again. The sensation faded, but left behind a hollow feeling, like the aftermath of a bass note so deep you feel rather than hear it. I grabbed the internal comm. "Engineering, this is Estrada. Did you feel that?" "Yes, sir," came the reply from Marco. "Power fluctuated by 3% for about 6 seconds. Backup systems kicked in, but everything's stable now." "Any explanation?" "None yet. Running diagnostics." I switched to the external monitoring systems. All station parameters appeared normal at first glance, but something made me check the hull integrity sensors. A hunch born from years of underwater research. What I saw made my stomach drop. Microfractures were forming in sections of the outer hull. Nothing immediately catastrophic, but definitely not normal. The pattern was strange too, not concentrated in high-stress areas as would be expected from pressure damage, but distributed in a way that suggested resonance. The hull material was resonating with some external frequency. I called Douglas immediately. As chief engineer, station integrity fell under his domain. "Park here," he answered, sounding distracted. "Douglas, I need you to look at the hull integrity data from the past hour, focusing on sections 12 through 18. I heard typing, then silence. Finally, "I'm looking at it now. This isn't right. What do you think caused it?" "Not mechanical failure," he said firmly. "These aren't stress fractures from pressure or material fatigue. The pattern is all wrong." More typing. "It almost looks like vibration damage, like when you shatter a wine glass with the right frequency." "That's what I thought too," I said, the implications sinking in. Could our systems have caused this? Some kind of resonance from our own equipment? No way. We're designed specifically to avoid those harmonic frequencies. This is external. His voice lowered. "Thomas, is this related to your creature?" I didn't answer immediately. The pieces were coming together in my mind, forming a picture I didn't like. "I think it might be getting closer," I finally said. "And its acoustic emissions are affecting more than just our instruments now. They're affecting us, the crew, and now the station itself." "How powerful would sound have to be to cause this kind of damage?" Douglas asked. "More powerful than anything we've recorded from known marine life," I replied. "Even the loudest sperm whale clicks wouldn't do this." "So what do we do?" I looked at the data again, calculating. "I'm calling another meeting. 1 hour, command center. Get Ember to notify everyone. We need to discuss our options." "Options for what?" Douglas pressed. "For what we do when something that can crack our hull with sound decides to pay us a visit," I said. 1 hour, Douglas. After we disconnected, I stared at the hull integrity display. The microfractures weren't growing, at least not rapidly. But they were there. Physical evidence that whatever we'd discovered was not just an interesting scientific find anymore. It was a potential threat to Station Argus and everyone aboard. I needed to decide our next steps carefully. Scientific discovery was our mission, but crew safety had to come first. The meeting would determine whether we continued observation, attempted communication, or initiated emergency protocols. I pulled up all our data on the acoustic signal and began preparing my briefing, wondering how the rest of the team would react to what I had to tell them. I adjusted the display resolution on the main screen as the last of the crew filed into the command center. The data I'd spent the past hour compiling needed to be crystal clear for everyone to understand what we were dealing with. Cooper took a seat next to Ember, both rubbing their temples. Josie stood with her arms crossed near the back wall, while Douglas leaned against his usual console. Debbie was the last to arrive, tablet in hand, already scrolling through the preliminary data I'd sent to the science team. "Thank you all for coming on short notice," I said, my voice sounding too loud in the quiet room. "As most of you know, we've been tracking an unidentified biological signature for the past 48 hours. What you may not know is that there have been some concerning developments." I tapped a command sequence into my console, bringing up the acoustic tracking display on the main screen. A pulsing dot moved slowly across a three-dimensional grid representing the ocean around Station Argus. "This is our visitor," I said, pointing to the dot. 2 days ago, it was approximately 12 miles from our position. As of 20 minutes ago, it's less than 5 miles away and moving toward us. Murmurs broke out among the crew. I noticed several of them wincing as they spoke, confirming what Cooper had told me about the headaches. "The signal strength has increased by roughly 60% since our first detection," I continued, pulling up a side-by-side comparison of the acoustic waveforms. "These aren't just louder readings because it's closer. The creature is actually producing more powerful emissions." Debbie stepped forward, her eyes fixed on the biological data scrolling across a secondary display. "Based on displacement calculations and acoustic resonance patterns, we're looking at an organism significantly larger than any known cetacean species." She pulled up her own analysis on the main screen. "The blue whale, our largest known animal, averages around 90 feet. This creature appears to be at least twice that size, possibly as large as a city block." "That's impossible," someone muttered from the back. "The data suggests otherwise," Debbie replied, pointing to a series of measurements. "These are consistent readings from multiple sensor arrays. Unless there's a systematic error across all our detection systems, we're dealing with something unprecedented." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. I watched their faces. Some showed excitement, others fear, but most just looked tired and confused. The persistent headaches were taking their toll. "There's more," I said after giving them a moment. "We've detected microfractures forming in sections of the outer hull. Douglas and I believe these are caused by resonance with the creature's acoustic emissions." Douglas nodded grimly. "The fractures aren't critical yet, but they're forming in a pattern that suggests the hull is vibrating in response to external frequencies. If the signal gets much stronger, we could see more significant structural damage." "And the headaches many of you are experiencing," Cooper added, "likely stem from the same source. Low-frequency sound waves can cause physical symptoms like headaches, nausea, and sleep disturbances." Josie stepped forward, her face tight with concern. "Given these developments, I think we need to consider an immediate evacuation of the station." She looked directly at me. "This isn't what we signed up for, Thomas. The safety protocols are clear about structural threats." I shook my head firmly. "Evacuation is not an option I'm willing to consider at this point." "Why not?" Josie demanded. "We have 8 ascent pods, each capable of carrying 3 personnel. We could have everyone on the surface in under an hour." "And then what?" I asked, keeping my voice level. "Those pods are designed for emergency ascent, not extended surface operations. They have minimal life support, no propulsion systems, and limited communication capabilities." I pulled up schematics of the ascent pods on the main display. Each pod is essentially a pressure vessel with an emergency beacon. Once deployed, they float to the surface and wait for retrieval. Given our remote location, that could take days. Better than staying here if the station is compromised, Josie countered. No, it's not, I said firmly. The pods would be even more vulnerable than the station. They have no acoustic dampening systems, no way to maintain silent running. If this creature is attracted to or agitated by artificial structures, the pods would be completely exposed. Douglas cleared his throat. Thomas is right. The station at least has reinforced bulkheads and emergency protocols. The pods are just bubbles. Our best option, I continued, is to maintain silent running and continue monitoring the situation. The creature has made no aggressive moves toward the station. It may pass by without further incident. Josie didn't look convinced, but she didn't argue further. I turned back to the main display, highlighting the creature's projected path. For now, we maintain normal operations with some adjustments. All external equipment is to be powered down except for essential monitoring systems. No active sonar, no underwater lights, no external machinery. We go as quiet as possible. I assigned specific tasks to each department. Engineering would monitor hull integrity, science would continue passive observation, medical would track crew symptoms, and communications would maintain a direct line to surface support in case evacuation did become necessary. As the meeting broke up, I noticed the crew leaving in pairs and small groups, talking in hushed voices. The tension was palpable. Cooper hung back until everyone else had left. "You really think we're safer here?" he asked quietly. "I think we have better odds," I replied, "but keep the medical bay ready, just in case." He nodded and left me alone with the displays, the pulsing dot now 4.5 miles away and still moving toward us. I jerked awake in total darkness. Something had pulled me from a restless sleep, a sound or sensation I couldn't immediately place. My quarters were silent except for the soft hum of air circulation, but something felt wrong. Then I felt it, a deep, bone-rattling vibration that seemed to come from everywhere at once. It wasn't loud like a sound, but powerful like a physical force pressing against my chest. My desk lamp began to slide across the surface, and a book fell from my shelf. The vibration intensified. My coffee mug crashed to the floor. A framed photo toppled. Then with a sharp crack, a ceiling panel broke loose and crashed down, missing my bunk by inches. I scrambled out of bed and hit the station-wide alarm button on my wall panel. The lights in my quarters flickered on automatically, bathing the room in harsh white emergency lighting. I grabbed the intercom. "This is Dr. Estrada. All personnel to emergency stations immediately. This is not a drill. Repeat, all personnel to emergency stations." I pulled on a jumpsuit and boots, not bothering with the zipper as another, stronger vibration shook the room. The floor seemed to tilt slightly beneath my feet. Something was very wrong with the station. The corridor outside my quarters was filled with crew members in various states of dress, many looking disoriented and frightened. The emergency lights cast everything in stark relief, creating deep shadows that made familiar faces look alien. "Move calmly to your emergency stations," I ordered, trying to project confidence I didn't feel. "Engineering team, report to Douglas in Section 3. Medical team, set up triage in the mess hall." The station swayed again, more noticeably this time. I grabbed a handrail to steady myself, watching as several crew members stumbled. The vibration was getting worse, not better. I pushed my way toward the command center, fighting against the swaying of the structure. Twice, I had to stop and brace myself against a wall, as particularly strong vibrations shuddered through the station. Each time I could hear the creaking of metal and the ominous sound of objects falling in nearby rooms. When I reached the command center, I found Ember at her communication station, her face pale but focused as she relayed information to the surface. Debbie was hunched over the external monitoring system, her eyes wide. "Debbie, what are we seeing?" I asked, making my way to her station. "It's right outside," she whispered, not looking up from her screen. "Look at this." She switched the feed to the main display. The external cameras showed murky water, illuminated only by the station's emergency lights. At first, I saw nothing unusual, just the usual deep ocean darkness. Then something moved across the field of view, something massive. It wasn't clearly defined, more a shifting of shadows than a distinct shape, but the scale was unmistakable. Whatever was passing by the station was enormous, blocking out the ambient light as it moved. The external lights caught brief glimpses of what looked like smooth, dark skin stretched over a body larger than anything I'd ever seen. "How big is that thing?" Ember asked, her voice barely audible over the alarms. "Bigger than our estimates," Debbie replied, her fingers flying across her keyboard. "Based on the portion visible in frame, at least 300 feet long, maybe more." Another violent shake rocked the station, stronger than before. Warning lights flashed across several consoles. Douglas burst into the command center, his face streaked with sweat. "The tether's damaged," he reported, pulling up structural data on his tablet. "The main anchor point is showing stress fractures, but it's holding for now. If it gets much worse, if the tether fails, we lose our connection to the surface." I finished for him. "What about the hull integrity?" "Multiple sections showing increased fracturing, but the pressure seals are still intact. We've activated emergency bulkheads as a precaution." I turned back to the main display, just as the creature passed out of the camera's view. The vibrations began to subside slightly, but the damage had been done. Warning indicators continued to flash across multiple systems. "It's moving away," Debbie said, tracking it on the acoustic sensors. "Heading east now." I pulled up the acoustic readings on my own console, studying the pattern of emissions. Something about the way the creature had approached the station bothered me. Its path wasn't random. It had adjusted course several times, each adjustment bringing it closer to our position. "Run a pattern analysis on its movement since we first detected it," I told Debbie. She nodded and began the calculations. A moment later, a map appeared showing the creature's complete path over the past 2 days. It had been traveling in a relatively straight line until approximately 12 hours ago, when it began a series of course changes that brought it directly to Station Argus. "It didn't stumble across us by accident," I said, the realization sending a chill through me. "It changed course to investigate us." "Maybe it was just curious," Ember suggested hopefully. "Like whales sometimes are about boats." I was about to respond when Douglas called out from his station. "Movement on the eastern sensors. It's changing direction again." We all watched in silence as the acoustic signature on the tracking display slowed, turned, and began moving back toward us. "It's coming back," I said, unable to keep the dread from my voice. "It's not passing by randomly. It's deliberately investigating us. And worse, it's circling back for another pass." I stared at the approaching signature, knowing that our silent running protocols were no longer enough. Whatever this creature was, it had found us, and it was coming back. The creature's acoustic signature grew stronger on our displays, confirming what I'd already concluded. It had identified our position and was making a deliberate return approach. I leaned over the main console, my fingers flying across the controls to maximize our external camera coverage. "Everyone stay focused," I told the command center crew. "We need every bit of data we can get while maintaining silent running protocols." Ember nodded from her station, her face pale but determined. Douglas was already coordinating with his engineering team through a headset, his voice low and measured as he instructed them to reinforce critical bulkheads. Debbie stood at the biological monitoring station, her eyes wide as she watched the acoustic signature grow stronger. "It's approaching from the east," she reported. "Speed approximately 15 knots. That's faster than before." I pulled up the external camera feeds on the main display, cycling through different angles until I found what I was looking for, a shadow moving through the darkness of the deep ocean. At first, it was just a disturbance in the water, a shifting of currents that our spotlights couldn't quite penetrate. Then, as it drew closer, the creature began to take form. "Magnify Sector 4 East," I instructed, and the image zoomed in. What came into view sent a chill through me unlike anything I'd experienced in my scientific career. Mottled, pale skin filled our screens, an expanse of flesh so vast that even our widest angle cameras couldn't capture its entirety. The creature's epidermis had a translucent quality, adapted for the permanent darkness of these depths, with what appeared to be bioluminescent spots arranged in complex patterns across its surface. "My God," Debbie whispered beside me. "The size. It's beyond anything in our classification systems." As the creature moved closer to the station, more details became visible. What caught my attention most was a massive pulsing organ located on what appeared to be its forward section. The organ expanded and contracted rhythmically, surrounded by tissue structures that resembled resonance chambers. "That's its vocal apparatus," I said, pointing to the screen. "It's unlike anything we've documented before. The size and complexity suggest it can produce and modulate sounds across a spectrum we haven't even considered." The creature drifted closer to the station, now just a few hundred yards away. Its movement pattern had changed, no longer the direct approach of earlier, but a slow, circular pattern that reminded me of predatory behavior. It was studying us. "It's scanning the station," I realized aloud. "Those acoustic emissions, they're not just communication, they're echolocation on a massive scale." The pressure in my head intensified as I watched the creature on the monitors. The sensation had evolved from the dull ache of the past days into something more immediate, a presence pressing against my consciousness. The command center doors slid open and Cooper staggered in. His normally composed demeanor was gone, replaced by something I'd never seen in him before, raw fear. His face was drained of color, and he gripped the edge of the nearest console to steady himself. "Thomas," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can hear it." I turned from the monitor. "Hear what, Cooper?" "The creature." He tapped his temple with a trembling finger. "In my head, it's communicating." Douglas and Ember exchanged concerned glances. Debbie stopped her analysis and turned to look at Cooper. "That's not possible," I said, though my own head throbbed with increasing intensity. "It's just the low-frequency sound affecting your equilibrium. We've discussed this." Cooper shook his head firmly. "No, it's more than that. I'm a doctor. I know the difference between physical symptoms and—" He trailed off, searching for words. "It's in pain, Thomas. And it's angry." "Cooper, you need to rest," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The acoustic emissions are affecting all of us." "You're not listening," Cooper insisted, his voice rising. "It knows we're here. It feels threatened. It's trying to—" A new thought struck me with such clarity that I physically recoiled from it. Our silent running protocols were based on human understanding of acoustics, designed to minimize noise that human technology could detect or that known marine species might sense. "It evolved in near-perfect silence," I said slowly, the realization washing over me. "Down here, where ambient noise is minimal, it would have developed acoustic sensitivity beyond anything we've accounted for." I turned back to the monitors, watching the creature's methodical circling of our station. Our silent running isn't silent enough, I continued, my mind racing. Every pump, every generator, every life support system. To this creature, we must sound like... Before I could finish my thought, the creature suddenly halted its circling. On the monitor, I watched as the vocal organ on its forward section expanded dramatically, pulsing with bioluminescent light. "It's going to..." I started to warn. The impact hit before I could finish. Not a physical collision, but a concentrated acoustic blast that struck the station with devastating precision. The sound was beyond hearing, a pressure wave that seemed to compress the air itself. The floor beneath us buckled, and I was thrown from my feet, along with everyone else in the command center. Equipment crashed to the floor, ceiling panels collapsed, and the lights flickered before emergency power stabilized them. Warning lights flashed across every console, bathing the command center in pulsing red. The station's automated alert system began announcing multiple critical failures throughout the facility. "Hull integrity compromised in multiple sectors," the computerized voice announced with terrible calm. "Emergency bulkheads activating." I pulled myself up using the edge of the console, tasting blood where I'd bitten my lip during the fall. Around me, the command crew were picking themselves up, dazed but moving. "Status report," I called out, my voice competing with the blaring alarms. Ember was the first to respond, her hands flying across her damaged console. "Communications are still online, surface link intact but unstable." Debbie managed to get back to her station. "Creature is maintaining position approximately 200 yards east of the station. Bio readings suggest it's preparing for another emission." The command center doors slid open and Douglas rushed in. His uniform was torn at the shoulder and a gash across his forehead leaked blood down the side of his face. "Hull breach in Section 7, he shouted over the alarms. "Emergency seals engaged, but the structural damage is severe." A cold dread spread through me. "Section 7? Who was stationed there?" Douglas opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted as Josie Campbell entered the command center. Her usual composed efficiency was gone, replaced by a grim, haunted expression that told me everything before she spoke a word. "We've lost 2 crew members," she reported, her voice hollow. "Olivia Johnson and Lee Edwards were in Section 7 when the breach occurred. The emergency bulkheads. They didn't make it to the safe zone in time." The words hit me like a physical blow. Olivia, with her bright enthusiasm and meticulous attention to detail. Lee, barely 30, and one of our most promising technical specialists. Both gone in an instant. "Are you certain?" I asked, though I knew the answer from Josie's expression. She nodded once, her jaw tight. The life sign monitors flatlined simultaneously when the section decompressed. There's no possibility of survival. The weight of responsibility crashed down on me with crushing force. My insistence on continuing the mission, my fascination with this discovery, my decision to keep the station operational despite the warning signs. These choices had directly led to the deaths of 2 people under my command. For a moment, I couldn't speak. The command center continued its emergency operations around me, but I stood frozen, the faces of Olivia and Lee vivid in my mind. "Thomas," Douglas said, his voice cutting through my shock. "We need to make decisions. Now." His words pulled me back to the present crisis. 2 crew members were gone, but 18 others remained under my responsibility. "Prepare the evacuation pods," I ordered, my voice steadier than I felt. "We're abandoning the station. Priority to medical and science staff first, then support personnel." Douglas shook his head. wiping blood from his eye with the back of his hand. "That won't work, Thomas. The creature is too close to our position." He pulled up a schematic on his tablet and showed me the creature's position relative to our evacuation routes. "The pods would have to ascend right past it," he explained grimly. "Based on what we just saw, it would detect and destroy any pod before it reached safety depth. We're trapped here." I stared at the schematic, the terrible reality sinking in. The creature had us pinned down, whether by instinct or intent, and our options were rapidly disappearing. The pressure in my head built as I stared at the tracking display. The creature's acoustic signature pulsed brighter with each passing second. My mind raced through our dwindling options. 2 crew members were already dead. More would follow if I couldn't figure something out. "We need to see what we're dealing with," I said, pushing away from the console. "I want a visual." Douglas looked up from his damage control panel. "You want to what?" "A visual. I need to see it." I moved toward the corridor that led to the observation deck. "Keep working on stabilizing the damaged sections. Ember, maintain communications protocols. Debbie, track that thing's movements and feed them to my tablet." I didn't wait for their responses. The corridor lights flickered as I made my way forward, the metal floor plate still vibrating under my feet. The observation deck was rarely used. Most of our work happened through sensors and remote systems, but right now, I needed to look this thing in the eye, if it had eyes. The deck was a small, reinforced chamber with thick viewport panels designed to withstand the crushing pressure of the deep. I sealed the door behind me and approached the main viewport, tablet in hand. Debbie's tracking data showed the creature completing another circuit around the station, moving closer with each pass. I pressed my face to the cold, transparent panel and waited. The floodlights outside cast weak cones of illumination into the blackness, barely penetrating the murky depths. At first, I saw nothing but swirling currents and the occasional bit of marine snow. Then something moved at the edge of the light. Something massive. It entered the illuminated zone slowly, its pale, mottled skin reflecting the station's lights. This wasn't a fleeting glimpse or a shadow. The creature was fully visible now, deliberately presenting itself. My breath caught as I took in its true form. It was vaguely cetacean in overall shape, but the similarities ended there. The body was at least twice the length of the largest blue whale ever recorded, with a tapered form that widened at what I assumed was the head. No dorsal fin was visible, but a series of ridges ran along its length, pulsing with soft, blue-green bioluminescence that seemed to flow in patterns rather than remain static. Most striking was the complete absence of eyes. Where a whale would have had a distinctive head shape with visible eyes, this creature had a smooth, featureless surface that curved downward to a massive opening. This opening wasn't a mouth in any conventional sense. It was more like an organic chamber, a cavernous organ that opened and closed rhythmically. Inside, I could see tissues that expanded and contracted, glowing with the same bioluminescent patterns that covered its body. My tablet beeped with an incoming message from Debbie. Acoustic output increasing. Pattern matches pre-attack signature. I understood immediately. That organ wasn't for feeding. It was a sound-generating mechanism of extraordinary complexity. The creature was preparing another acoustic attack, one that would likely finish what the first had started. Given the structural damage we'd already sustained, a second hit would completely destroy the station. I tapped my comm unit. "Douglas, I need full power access to the external communications array." A pause, then. "What? Those systems aren't designed for..." "Just do it. Override the safety protocols and give me control. Now." Another pause. I watched as the creature completed another circuit, coming even closer to the station. Its bioluminescent patterns seemed to speed up, flowing more rapidly along its body. "You have control," Douglas said. "But whatever you're planning, you should know the array wasn't built for high-power applications. You push too much through it, the whole system will fry. Better than all of us dying when that thing hits us again." I hurried back toward the command center, keeping my eyes on the creature until the last possible moment before the viewport was out of sight. Back in command, I found the crew in various states of panic and determination. Ember was at her station, hands moving quickly over her console. Douglas was coordinating with his engineering team over comms. Cooper was treating a crew member with a head wound while Josie helped hold pressure on the injury. I rushed to my station and pulled up the communications array controls that Douglas had transferred to my terminal. "What's the plan?" Douglas asked, moving to stand beside me. His face was tight with concern, eyes darting between my screen and the damage reports still coming in from across the station. "Sound cancellation," I said, fingers already flying across the interface. "If that thing is using acoustic energy as a weapon, we might be able to neutralize it with an inverse waveform." "You mean like noise-canceling headphones?" Douglas looked skeptical. "Same principle, drastically different scale." I pulled up the recorded data from the creature's first attack, studying the waveform patterns. Every sound wave has a corresponding inverse wave that, when aligned correctly, will cancel it out. Equal amplitude, opposite phase. "That's theoretical physics in controlled environments," Douglas argued, leaning closer to see what I was doing. "We're talking about a massive biological entity producing complex acoustic patterns in open water." "You have a better idea?" I asked without looking up. "Because in about 2 minutes, that thing is going to hit us again, and we won't survive it." Douglas fell silent, watching as I worked. On the main display, Debbie had brought up the external camera feeds, showing the creature circling even closer now, its bioluminescent patterns pulsating more rapidly. "It's preparing," Debbie said, her voice unnaturally calm. "The organ is expanding." I nodded, focusing on my task. The creature's acoustic signature was complex, layers of frequencies, some beyond normal biological capabilities. But there was a pattern, a structure I could identify. I began constructing an inverse waveform, starting with the primary frequencies from the first attack. "Ember, I need the communications array reconfigured to broadcast on these frequencies." I sent her the specifications. "Maximum power output." She nodded, fingers dancing across her console. "The array isn't designed for this kind of broadcast. It might burn out the whole communication system. If this doesn't work, we won't need communications anyway," I said grimly. The station trembled as the creature moved closer. On the display, we could see it positioning itself directly beneath us, the massive sound-generating organ now fully open, pulsing with intense light. "It's in attack position," Debbie announced, her scientific detachment finally cracking. "Directly beneath the central hub." 30 seconds to array reconfiguration," Ember called out. I continued refining the inverse waveform, adjusting parameters based on the creature's current acoustic output. The calculations were complex, and I was working purely on theory and instinct. If I was wrong, if the frequencies didn't align perfectly, we'd still take the full force of the attack. "Everyone brace for impact," Douglas shouted, triggering the station-wide alert system. The command center filled with the harsh sound of klaxons. "Ready," Ember said, her finger hovering over the broadcast control. I completed the final adjustments to the waveform. On the screen, I could see the creature's organ glowing brighter, reaching peak expansion. It was now or never. "Brace yourselves," I shouted, and hit the broadcast command. The station's communications array engaged at full power, sending our constructed anti-wave pattern through the water. For a split second, nothing happened. Then the creature released its attack, a massive pulse of acoustic energy directed straight at us. I expected to feel the station tear apart around us. Instead, there was an eerie silence. The lights stabilized. The shaking stopped. On the external cameras, the creature remained motionless beneath us, its organs still fully extended, but now pulsing with an erratic, confused pattern. The two sound patterns, the creature's attack and our inverse wave, had perfectly canceled each other out. The sound cancellation wave rippled outward, and I watched the immediate effect on the main display. Where chaos and alarms had filled the command center moments before, now a strange calm settled over us. The creature's acoustic signature on our monitors flickered erratically, its pattern disrupted by our countermeasure. "Everyone stay at your stations," I said, my voice sounding unnaturally loud in the sudden quiet. "Ember, status on the communications array?" She tapped rapidly at her console, eyes fixed on the readouts. "Array functioning at 130% of rated capacity. We're overclocking the system, but it's holding." I grabbed my tablet and headed toward the corridor. "I need to see this with my own eyes. Debbie, keep tracking and feed the data to me." The observation deck was exactly where I'd left it minutes earlier, but the atmosphere had changed completely. Instead of the oppressive pressure that had built in my head during the creature's approach, there was an almost unsettling absence of sensation. I pressed my face to the viewport again, searching the illuminated water. The creature came into view, its massive form now writhing in what looked like confusion. The bioluminescent patterns across its pale skin flashed in chaotic sequences, bright bursts followed by rapid dimming, creating a disorienting strobe effect in the dark water. Its movement had changed from the deliberate, predatory circling to something erratic and disturbed. "My God," I whispered, watching as the creature twisted its enormous body away from the station. The vocal organ at its center contracted and expanded rapidly, but whatever sounds it was producing weren't reaching us. Our cancellation field was working. My tablet pinged with a message from Debbie. "Acoustic signature showing massive disruption." "What are you seeing?" I quickly typed back. "It's disoriented, backing away. Sound cancellation is working." I returned to the command center to find the crew staring at the main display, tracking the creature's movements as it retreated to a distance of approximately half a mile from the station. "What just happened?" Josie asked, her voice tight with tension. "Is it gone?" "Not gone," I said, moving to the central console, "but definitely confused." Douglas looked up from the damage control panel. "Someone want to explain why we're not crushed like a soda can right now?" The entire command crew turned to me, faces showing a mixture of relief, confusion, and lingering fear. I took a deep breath. "We created a bubble of perfect silence around Station Argus," I explained, pulling up a schematic on the main screen. "The inverse waveform we broadcast is exactly matched to cancel out the creature's acoustic emissions. When two sound waves with identical frequency but opposite phase meet, they cancel each other out, creating silence. So we're... What? Acoustically invisible?" Ember asked. I nodded. "Essentially, yes. Based on everything we've observed, this creature perceives its environment primarily through sound, like an extreme form of echolocation. It was using those acoustic pulses to map our station, maybe even to communicate with us." "Communicate?" Cooper's voice was strained. "You think that thing was trying to talk to us?" "I don't know," I admitted. "But its behavior suggests it was investigating us deliberately, not just attacking blindly." Debbie pointed to the tracking display. "It's circling again, but at a much greater distance, almost like it's confused." "That's exactly what it is," I said. Imagine if you were walking through a room and suddenly a section of it completely disappeared from all your senses. Not dark, not empty, just gone. That's what we've done to its perception. We've created a void where it can't sense anything. Douglas frowned. So we're hiding in plain sight? For now, I confirmed. The creature relies on sound to navigate and interact with its environment. We've effectively made ourselves invisible by creating a zone where sound doesn't propagate normally. We all watched the main display as the creature made a wide, slow circle around our position. Its movements were hesitant now, almost cautious, as it probed the edges of our silence bubble with its acoustic sensors. It's testing the boundaries, Debbie observed. Fascinating. After completing one full circuit, the creature paused. Its bioluminescent patterns pulsed several times in a sequence I hadn't seen before. Then, with a powerful surge of its massive body, it turned and moved away from the station, heading back toward the darkness of the trench. "It's retreating," Ember said, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't take my eyes off the tracking display. "For now, but we need to stay alert. Douglas, what's our damage assessment?" Douglas pulled up the structural integrity display. "Not good. We have a complete breach in Section 7 where we lost Johnson and Edwards." His voice caught slightly on their names. "Emergency bulkheads deployed successfully, but we've got compromised hull integrity in Sections 5, 8, and 12. The main tether to the surface has sustained damage, about 60% structural integrity remaining." "Can we still communicate with the surface?" I asked. Ember checked her systems. "Yes, but bandwidth is limited. The fiber optic bundle in the tether was partially severed. We're routing through the backup systems." "Is the tether stable enough to hold the station?" Josie asked, voicing the concern on everyone's mind. Douglas ran a quick simulation. "For now, yes. The automated tensioning system is compensating, but I wouldn't want to stay down here indefinitely. We should begin preparations for a controlled ascent within the next 48 to 72 hours. I nodded. "Agreed. But first, we need to make sure that creature is truly gone, and we need to document everything that's happened." I turned to Cooper. "I want full medical assessments of everyone who experienced those infrasound effects. We need to understand exactly what that thing was doing to us." "Already started," Cooper said. "I've got preliminary data from 7 crew members who reported the most severe symptoms." "Good. I'll help you interview the rest," I said. "Debbie, I want continuous monitoring of that creature's movements. If it so much as twitches in our direction, I want to know immediately." "On it," she replied, already setting up additional sensor arrays. "Josie, work with Douglas to begin ascent preparations. We need to be ready to move as soon as it's safe." She nodded, her face grim but determined. "Ember, get a full status report to Surface Command. They need to know what's happening down here." As the crew dispersed to their tasks, I pulled Douglas aside. "I need a more detailed assessment of our structural integrity. How bad is it really?" Douglas waited until we were alone by the engineering console before answering. "Worse than I said in front of the others. The tether is holding for now, but the strain on the damaged sections is increasing. If we get hit again, or if that creature comes back with something stronger..." He didn't need to finish the thought. "How long do we really have?" I asked quietly. 36 hours, maybe 48 if we're lucky and nothing else goes wrong." He pulled up a detailed scan of the tether connection point. "See these stress fractures? They're propagating through the main coupling. The automated tensioning system is compensating, but it's fighting a losing battle." I studied the display, noting the spreading network of microfractures. "Can we reinforce it?" My team is already working on it, but we're limited by what materials we have on hand. He ran a hand through his hair. We weren't exactly equipped for major structural repairs 3,000 feet underwater. Do what you can, I said, and keep me updated on any changes, good or bad. Over the next several hours, I worked closely with Douglas to get a complete picture of Station Argus's condition. We moved methodically through each section, documenting damage and prioritizing repairs. The loss of Section 7 was catastrophic, not just for the death of Johnson and Edwards, but for the critical equipment housed there. We'd lost a significant portion of our external sensor array and one of the auxiliary power generators. The tether was our biggest concern. It served as our physical connection to the surface, housing power lines, communications cables, and providing structural stability for the station. With it compromised, we were operating on borrowed time. If we redistribute power through the remaining conduits, we can reduce the load on the damaged sections, Douglas suggested as we reviewed the schematics. It won't fix the structural issues, but it might buy us a few more hours. Do it, I said, and start preparing the ascent pods for a staged evacuation if necessary. Essential personnel last. After finishing with Douglas, I joined Cooper in the medical bay where he was conducting interviews with crew members who had experienced the strongest reactions to the creature's infrasound. Tell me exactly what you felt, I asked Martinez, one of our engineering technicians. When did the symptoms start? About 6 hours after we first detected the acoustic signal, he replied, rubbing his temples at the memory. It started as just a headache, but then it got worse. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't sleep. And then... He hesitated. Go on, Cooper encouraged. Everything you tell us helps us understand what happened. I started hearing things, Martinez admitted. Not voices exactly, but pressure, like something pushing against my thoughts. He looked embarrassed. I know that sounds crazy. It doesn't, I assured him. Cooper reported similar experiences, and so did several others. Cooper made notes on his tablet. Any visual disturbances? Changes in perception? Martinez nodded slowly. I kept seeing movement at the edge of my vision, and sometimes the walls seemed to pulse, like they were breathing. I exchanged a glance with Cooper. This matched what other crew members had reported. Thank you, I said. Get some rest now. Cooper will give you something to help you sleep. After Martinez left, Cooper showed me his compiled data. I'm seeing consistent patterns across all affected crew members. The symptoms escalated in direct correlation with the creature's proximity and the intensity of its acoustic output. Could it have been deliberate? I asked. Was it trying to communicate, or was this just a side effect of its natural emissions? Cooper shrugged. Hard to say. But the specificity of the effects suggests something more than random interference. The human brain isn't designed to process infrasound at those frequencies or intensities. It could have been using sound to, probe us somehow. Document everything, I instructed. This could be the most significant xenobiology discovery in history, if we can get the data back to the surface. Throughout the rest of the shift, I periodically checked the tracking systems. The creature had retreated to a distance of approximately 15 miles, hovering at the edge of our detection range. It hadn't left completely, but it wasn't approaching either. It's still out there, Debbie confirmed when I stopped by her station, maintaining position at the edge of the trench. Watching us? I asked. Maybe. Or maybe just confused by what happened. She adjusted the sensitivity on the long-range scanners. I've been analyzing its acoustic patterns before and after our countermeasure. There's a definite change in frequency and modulation, almost like it's recalibrating. "Keep monitoring," I said, "and let me know immediately if it starts moving our way again." As a precaution, I worked with Ember to set up continuous sound cancellation protocols. We couldn't maintain the full power broadcast indefinitely without burning out the communications array, but we could establish a baseline cancellation field that would activate automatically if the creature approached again. "I've programmed the system to recognize its acoustic signature," Ember explained as she showed me the implementation. "If it comes within 5 miles, the system will begin generating a low-level countermeasure. If it gets closer, we escalate to full cancellation." "Good work," I said, reviewing the protocols. "How long can we sustain full cancellation if needed?" "About 6 hours at maximum output before we risk permanent damage to the array," she replied. "After that, we'd need to reduce power or risk losing the system entirely." "Let's hope it doesn't come to that," I said. In the final hours of my shift, I met with Josie to draft emergency evacuation procedures. The command center was quieter now, with most of the crew focused on repairs or rest. "We have 5 ascent pods," Josie said, pulling up the station schematics. "Each can accommodate 8 people comfortably, 10 in an emergency. With our current crew complement of 38, we'd need at least 4 pods. And the 5th as backup in case of malfunction," I added. "What's the ascent time to the surface?" "Approximately 4 hours with standard decompression protocols," she replied. "We could cut that to 2 hours in an extreme emergency, but the risk of decompression sickness would increase significantly." I nodded, considering our options. Priority 1 is getting the research data to the surface. Priority 2 is personnel evacuation, starting with injured crew and essential science staff. "And command crew?" she asked, looking at me directly. "Last," I said firmly. "We stay until everyone else is clear." We worked methodically through the evacuation scenarios, mapping out pod assignments, critical equipment allocation, and ascent trajectories. By the time we finished, we had a comprehensive plan that could be implemented within 30 minutes if necessary. "Let's hope we don't need this," Josie said as she finalized the documentation. "Always better to be prepared," I replied, signing off on the procedures. "Have these distributed to all section leaders immediately." I glanced at the main tracking display one last time before ending my shift. The creature remained at the edge of our detection range, its acoustic signature a dim pulse against the background noise of the ocean. For now, at least, we had bought ourselves some time. I returned to the viewport on the observation deck, staring out into the dark water. Our external lights illuminated only a small bubble around the station, beyond which lay the vast, unexplored depths. Somewhere out there, the creature waited. I wasn't naive enough to think we had seen the last of it. I rested my hand against the cold, thick glass, feeling the subtle vibrations of the station through my fingertips. The tether would hold, for now. We had a plan to ascend, if nothing else went wrong. And we had our sound cancellation, unless the creature adapted. I turned away from the observation deck viewport, the endless darkness outside no longer holding answers. 3 days had passed since our encounter with the creature, and my body ached from the long shifts. Sleep came in brief snatches between repair work and data analysis. The overhead lights in the corridor flickered as I made my way toward Section 5, where the maintenance team worked to reinforce compromised bulkheads. "How's it coming along?" I asked, stepping over coils of cables and scattered tools. Ramirez, one of our structural specialists, looked up from his welding. "Almost finished with this section, Dr. Estrada. Another hour, tops." I nodded and checked the integrity readings on my tablet. The numbers weren't great, but they were stable. That would have to be good enough for our ascent. I continued my rounds through the station, checking each repair zone. The crew moved with purpose. their faces tight with concentration. Everyone knew we were working against time. When I reached the common area, I stopped. The crew had set up a small table against the wall. On it sat framed photos of Olivia Johnson and Lee Edwards, surrounded by personal items, Olivia's colorful hair ties and the baseball cap Lee always wore. A handwritten note listed their service dates at Station Argus. Someone had placed a small light that cast a warm glow over the display. I stood there for a long moment, looking at their faces. Olivia smiling broadly at what must have been her station orientation. Lee with his arm thrown around Douglas's shoulder at last year's Christmas gathering. Their deaths weighed on me. My decision to stay and study the creature had cost them their lives. "It wasn't your fault," Ember said, appearing beside me. I hadn't heard her approach. "I was in command," I replied, not looking away from the photos. We all wanted to study it. None of us could have known what would happen. I didn't answer. Instead, I reached out and straightened Lee's baseball cap, which had slipped slightly against his photo. "Debbie's looking for you," Ember said after a moment. "Says she has something you need to see in the lab." I thanked her and headed toward the science section. The memorial would remain there until we left, a reminder of what our discovery had cost us. The lab was a mess of equipment and data screens. Debbie hunched over her workstation, not looking up when I entered. "You wanted to see me?" I asked. She jumped slightly. "Thomas, yes, come look at this." She waved me over excitedly, pushing her tablet toward me. "I've been analyzing the acoustic data we collected during the encounter." I looked at the screen, which showed wavelength patterns and frequency analyses. "What am I looking at?" I isolated the creature's acoustic signatures and ran them through our biomapping software. She pulled up a 3D rendering of what appeared to be the creature's massive vocal organ. "Look at the neural connections here and here." She pointed to dense clusters in the model. "That's an unusual concentration," I noted, leaning closer. "It's more than unusual. It's unprecedented." Debbie's eyes were bright with excitement despite our situation. "The organ isn't just for communication. Based on the neural density and the way it processes returning sound waves, I think it functions as the creature's primary sensory system." I straightened up, my mind racing. "Like echolocation in dolphins?" "Much more sophisticated. The organ creates detailed three-dimensional acoustic maps of its surroundings." She pulled up another simulation showing sound waves emanating from the organ and bouncing back. "The resolution would far exceed any visual system we know of. It can likely detect minute changes in density, temperature, and movement throughout its environment." I sat down heavily in the chair beside her. That would explain why it reacted so strongly to our presence. We weren't just making noise. We were interfering with how it perceives reality. "Exactly." Debbie nodded eagerly. "And there's more. Look at these frequency ranges." She showed me another chart. The creature operates across a much wider acoustic spectrum than we initially thought. Some of these frequencies overlap with human underwater activities. I finished her sentence, the implications hitting me all at once. Military sonar, commercial shipping, oil exploration. "Yes," she said, her excitement fading into something more somber. "If this creature isn't unique, if there are others like it, then we've been disrupting their sensory systems for decades." I stood up and began pacing the small lab space. It would be like constantly shining bright, strobing lights into someone's eyes while they're trying to navigate a complex environment. We spent the next several hours analyzing the data, refining our understanding of the creature's biology. I developed a theory that explained not just our encounter but potentially broader ecological patterns. If these creatures use sound as their primary means of navigation, hunting, and communication, I explained as Debbie took notes, then human underwater activities across the oceans might be causing significant disruption to deep-sea acoustic ecosystems. Think about it. We're filling their environment with noise pollution on a massive scale. That could explain why it attacked us, Debbie suggested. Maybe it wasn't aggression, but a defensive response to what it perceived as an acoustic invasion. I nodded. Our sound cancellation technique essentially created a void in its perception, a blind spot. That's why it backed off. The intercom crackled to life, interrupting our discussion. Dr. Estrada to engineering, please. Dr. Estrada to engineering, Douglas's voice announced. I found Douglas in the tether control room, surrounded by displays showing stress analyses and structural integrity readings. You called me? I asked. He looked up from his console, dark circles under his eyes betraying his exhaustion. Tether stabilization is complete. We've reinforced the connection points and redistributed the load to compensate for the damaged sections. How's it holding? Better than I expected. He pulled up a detailed readout. It's at 72% capacity now. Not ideal, but it'll support a controlled ascent. How soon can we begin ascent protocols? Douglas wiped his face with a grimy hand. 24 hours. I need to run final checks on the ascent pods and make sure the emergency systems are fully operational. I clasped his shoulder. Good work. Really good work, Douglas. He nodded tiredly. Just doing my job. Call an all-hands meeting in the mess hall in 2 hours, I told him. It's time we briefed everyone on what we've learned and finalized our exit strategy. The mess hall was packed 2 hours later. Every surviving member of the station crew had squeezed into the space, sitting on tables and leaning against walls. The low hum of nervous conversation filled the room as I stood at the front, waiting for everyone to settle. Thank you all for coming, I began when the room quieted. As you know, we've been working around the clock to repair critical systems and prepare for our ascent to the surface. Douglas has informed me that tether stabilization is complete, and ascent protocols can begin within 24 hours. A murmur of relief passed through the crowd. Before we discuss evacuation procedures, I want to share what we've learned about the creature we encountered. I gestured to Debbie, who projected our findings onto the main screen. I walked them through our discovery about the creature's biology, how its massive vocal organ functioned as its primary sensory system, creating detailed acoustic maps of its surroundings. This isn't just a communication organ, I explained, pointing to the projection. It's how the creature sees its world, how it hunts, how it navigates, and its sensitivity far exceeds anything we've previously documented in marine life. I paused, looking around at the tired faces of my crew. What we've discovered here will revolutionize our understanding of deep-sea life, I continued. But it also demands a complete reassessment of humanity's acoustic impact on the oceans. Our sonar, our ships, our underwater construction. We've been essentially blinding these creatures, disrupting their ability to perceive their environment. Cooper raised his hand. Are you suggesting the attack was provoked by our presence? Not intentionally, I clarified. But yes, our station, despite our attempts at silent running, was likely perceived as an acoustic intrusion. The attack might have been a defensive response rather than aggression. Is it still out there? Someone asked from the back. I nodded. Yes, but it's maintaining distance. Our sound cancellation field appears to be working. So what happens now? Josie asked. We just go back to the surface and tell them to shut down all underwater activities? We bring back our data, I said firmly. We present our findings. And yes, we recommend significant changes to how we conduct underwater operations, especially in deep-sea environments. I took a deep breath. I also need to acknowledge what this discovery has cost us. Olivia and Lee gave their lives for this mission. That's a price that was far too high. And as your commanding officer, I take responsibility for the decisions that led to their deaths. The room fell silent. The scientific achievement here is substantial, I continued after a moment. We've confirmed the existence of an entirely new class of megafauna with sensory capabilities beyond anything previously documented. But we've also learned that our presence in these deep-sea environments may be more disruptive than we ever realized. I pulled up the evacuation schedule Douglas and I had prepared. Tomorrow, we begin our ascent. The pods will leave in the order shown here, with essential research data and medical cases going first. Douglas, Cooper, Debbie, Ember, and I will be in the final pod. After reviewing the evacuation procedures, I asked for questions. There were several technical ones about the ascent process, which Douglas handled. Then Josie stood up. Given what we now know about these creatures and their sensitivity to our presence, what's your recommendation regarding Station Argus and future deep-sea habitats in this region? I looked around the room, meeting the eyes of my crew. My personal recommendation is that we permanently abandon deep-sea habitats in this region. The ecological impact of our presence is too significant, and the risk to human life is too great. Josie nodded. I move that we make that our official recommendation to Surface Command. I second that, Cooper said from his seat. All in favor? I asked. Every hand in the room went up without hesitation. Then it's unanimous, I said. Our official recommendation will be to permanently abandon Station Argus and restrict future deep-sea habitats in this region. I settled into the chair at my desk, adjusted my tablet's recording settings, and pressed the start button. The soft chime indicated the log was now recording. Final station log, Dr. Thomas Estrada, Chief Science Officer. Station Argus. Time is 0800 hours. Ascent scheduled for 1400 today. My voice sounded rough even to my own ears. 4 days had passed since our encounter with the creature, and I hadn't slept more than 3 hours at a stretch. The final preparations for evacuation kept everyone busy, myself included. We came to Station Argus to study deep ocean acoustics. Specifically, we hoped to identify the source of unexplained low-frequency sounds detected by NOAA hydrophones since the 1990s, what the media dubbed the Bloop. What we found exceeded all scientific expectations. I paused, collecting my thoughts. The small quarters around me held 18 months of my life. The walls were bare now, all personal items packed away except for a single photo of the original crew taken the day we descended. The organism we encountered represents an entirely new classification of marine life. Its size alone, at least twice that of the largest blue whale, would make it remarkable. But its acoustic abilities are what truly distinguish it. The creature perceives and interacts with its environment primarily through sound, using a specialized vocal organ unlike anything previously documented in marine biology. I reached for my coffee mug, took a sip of the now cold liquid, and continued. Our analysis suggests the creature has evolved in isolation, adapting to the specific acoustic environment of deep ocean trenches. Its sensory system is exquisitely calibrated to natural deep-sea sounds. Our presence, even in silent running mode, created what must have been an unprecedented disruption to its perception. The gravity of what we'd learned weighed on me. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the ceiling. The implications extend far beyond this single discovery. Human activity in the oceans, shipping, sonar, drilling, even research stations like Argus, introduces acoustic intrusions into environments that evolved over millions of years without them. We've barely begun to understand the impact. I stood up and paced the small confines of my quarters. My leg muscles ached from the tension of the past few days. The attack on Station Argus appears to have been defensive, a response to what the creature perceived as an acoustic invasion of its territory. Our sound cancellation countermeasure effectively created a void in the creature's perceptual field. While this confused it enough to halt the attack, it also demonstrates how profoundly we can disrupt natural systems even when we think we're being careful. I stopped by the small viewport in my quarters, though there was nothing to see but the dark water beyond. The loss of crew members Olivia Johnson and Lee Edwards is a stark reminder of the risks of deep-sea exploration, but also of our responsibility to proceed with greater caution and respect for environments we don't fully understand. Their sacrifice won't be forgotten, nor will the lessons we've learned here. I took a breath, feeling the weight of those words. Our recommendation upon return to surface is immediate and permanent decommissioning of Station Argus and all similar deep-sea habitats in this region. Additionally, we propose a moratorium on new installations until proper acoustic impact studies can be conducted. The data we're bringing back should be sufficient to develop new protocols for human activity in deep ocean environments. I returned to my desk and sat down, ready to conclude the log. In closing, I want to acknowledge the extraordinary work of this crew under the most challenging circumstances. Their professionalism and dedication made it possible for us to survive and to bring back knowledge that will change how we approach ocean exploration. This will be the final log entry from Station Argus. Estrada out. I tapped the screen to end the recording and sat in silence for a moment, letting the finality of it sink in. Then I saved the file to our main data package for ascent. The small clock on my tablet showed 0847. We still had hours of work before departure. I left my quarters and walked down the corridor to the common area. The memorial for Olivia and Lee stood against the wall, just as it had yesterday. I stopped in front of it, taking in the details once more. Olivia's photo showed her laughing during last year's improvised holiday celebration. She'd made decorations from spare parts and aluminum foil, transforming the mess hall into something festive. Next to it was her collection of colorful hair ties. She'd always said they were her one luxury, 3,000 feet below the surface. Lee's baseball cap sat next to his photo. The station logo faded from constant wear. He'd been so young, only 29, with plans to write a book about deep-sea engineering when we returned. In his photo, he was giving the camera a thumbs up from inside one of the maintenance ducts, his face smeared with grease, but smiling. "I'm sorry," I said quietly to their photos. "We should have been more careful." The weight of command had never felt heavier than in that moment. My decision to study the creature had cost 2 lives. No scientific discovery could balance that equation. I picked up a small notebook that had belonged to Olivia. She'd used it to sketch marine life she observed through the viewports. I carefully placed it with the data packages going to the surface. Her family would want it, and her observations deserved to be part of our scientific record. After a final look at the memorial, I returned to my quarters and began sorting through my belongings. The ascent pods had strict weight limitations, just 50 pounds of personal items per crew member. The rest would stay with the station. I laid out my essential research materials first: handwritten notes, backup drives with raw data, and the journal I'd kept throughout the mission. Next came a few personal items: the photo of my sister, a small stone my father had given me before he died, and a book of poetry that had kept me company during the long nights below the surface. Everything else went into a storage container marked with my name. If someday another team came to salvage what we left behind, perhaps these things would find their way back to the surface. More likely, they would remain here as part of Argus's silent testament. Once packed, I headed to engineering to find Douglas. He was in the main control room, bent over a diagnostic panel with a tablet in hand. "How's it looking?" I asked, stepping next to him. Douglas straightened up, wincing slightly as he stretched his back. "Tether's holding steady at 72%. We've redistributed power to critical systems only. Life support, ascent pod bays, and your sound cancellation system are all on separate circuits with redundant backups." I nodded, looking over his shoulder at the diagnostic display. "And the pods?" "All checked and ready. Final loading begins at 1100. First pod launches at 1400 sharp." Douglas tapped through several screens on his tablet. "We've modified the ascent protocols to account for tether instability. Each pod will need to maintain minimum safe distance from the others." "Good work," I said. "Let's start the automated shutdown sequence for non-essentials." Douglas entered his authorization code, and I followed with mine. The screen prompted for final confirmation. "Once we start this, there's no going back," Douglas said. "Some systems won't come back online without a full restart from the surface." "I know." I pressed my thumb to the scanner. "Confirm shutdown sequence." The lights dimmed momentarily as the station began powering down peripheral systems. Status indicators on the main display changed from green to gray as sections went offline. Residential sections, secondary labs, auxiliary power, backup life support, all shutting down, Douglas read from the display. Primary systems will maintain until final evacuation. We watched in silence as Station Argus began its methodical powering down. 18 months of work, research, and life were ending in a carefully orchestrated sequence of shutdowns. "The sound cancellation system will be the last to go," I said. "I've set it to deactivate automatically once all pods clear minimum safe distance." Douglas nodded. "Smart. No point taking chances with our friend out there." "Has there been any sign of it?" I asked. "Nothing on the sensors since yesterday. It's keeping its distance." We finished the systems check, confirming that all critical functions for evacuation were operating correctly. The station felt different already, quieter, emptier, as if it understood it was being abandoned. "I'll see you at the pod bay," Douglas said, closing down his tablet. "Still on track for you, me, Cooper, Debbie, and Ember in the final pod?" "Yes, as planned." As Douglas left, I took one more look at the engineering displays. Station Argus had been a marvel of human ingenuity, the deepest inhabited research station ever built. Now it would become a footnote in the history of ocean exploration, a cautionary tale about the limits of our understanding. The next few hours passed quickly. I checked in with each department head, confirming that all essential data was backed up and ready for transport. The crew moved with purpose, their faces showing a mix of relief and regret about leaving. At 1300, I made my way to the observation deck for one final look. The viewport showed only darkness at first. Then as my eyes adjusted, I could make out the faint outlines of underwater terrain illuminated by the station's external lights. This deep sunlight never penetrated. Everything existed in perpetual night, adapted to darkness over millions of years of evolution. We had been visitors here, temporary intruders in an alien world. I pressed my hand against the cold glass, remembering the first time I'd stood here 18 months ago, filled with excitement about what we might discover. That excitement had never diminished, even now. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye. A brief flash in the distance, a pattern of light that appeared and vanished so quickly I might have imagined it. I stepped closer to the viewport, scanning the darkness. There it was again, a pulse of bioluminescence, too far away to make out clearly, but unmistakably organic. The pattern matched what we'd observed on the creature. It was out there, watching from a distance, perhaps as curious about us as we were about it. I felt no fear this time, only a profound sense of wonder. This ancient being would continue its existence in the silent deep long after we were gone, now wary of the strange voids that might appear in its domain. I made my way to the pod bay where the final evacuation was underway. 3 pods had already departed, carrying most of the crew and our research findings. Douglas was checking the seals on our pod, the last one remaining. Cooper, Debbie, and Ember were already inside, strapped into their seats with the last essential equipment secured around them. I took one final look back at the corridor leading to the heart of Station Argus. "Ready, Dr. Estrada?" Douglas asked from the pod entrance. I nodded and stepped inside, taking my seat as Douglas sealed the hatch. The small space felt cramped after the relative openness of the station, but it would carry us safely to the surface and the waiting recovery ships. As Douglas initiated the launch sequence, I closed my eyes briefly, thinking of what we were bringing back. Not just data about an unknown creature, but a new understanding of our place in the natural world and the responsibility that came with it. Next time, we would need to tread more carefully. The pod disengaged from the station with a soft jolt, beginning its long journey upward through the darkness toward the light.